I am one of the few people, I guess, that has had executive positions in the National Basketball Association, the National Football League, Major League Baseball, and the National Hockey League. And I've also worked in professional soccer, indoor lacrosse, and some other opportunities, which we'll talk about later. Lessons. I learned an early lesson when I worked for the Philadelphia 76ers. And I'm sure for the people listening and watching, many of them are big basketball fans, both of college and the pros. Well, I'm lucky enough that I worked for both the Memphis Grizzlies and the Golden State Warriors and the Philadelphia 76ers. And when I was at the 76ers in 1972, I was administrative assistant, just getting started, to the general manager, which meant I did everything, anytime, anywhere, whatever. I was a glorified gopher, and that was fine. And that team in 1972-73 had the worst record in the history of the NBA to this day. 9-73.
Okay, I am back. It is me, Summer Owens, and I'm super excited for this episode of SOA Success Stories because I am speaking with Andy Dolich. Now, Andy was the president of the Memphis Grizzlies when I started my career with the Memphis Grizzlies. That's right. My very first job out of college that I was super excited to have, super honored to have, super blessed to have. But Andy was somebody who I looked up to. And Andy, you probably didn't even know this. I look forward to the all staff meetings because I like seeing you up there and watching you lead and seeing how cool you were. That was the word for you all the time. He is cool, just cool. But today, Andy is the president of Dolich Consulting, and he deals with really all things in the sports world. So Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, Summer, it's great to see you. And we had a pretty good team on the court in Memphis as we played at the Pyramid and then moved to our beautiful new home, FedEx Forum. But it was the people that really made our success. And we'll talk a bit about that. As you could see in the background, I've got a few sports hats and some other things hanging on the wall in my global headquarters. And I'm based here in Northern California, about 15 minutes south of Stanford University, I guess what you would call the Silicon Valley. As you know, Summer, I try to bring some degree of humor to conversations. I call the Silicon Valley Siliconia, and people go like, what country is that? I go, well, if you can't figure it out, it's your problem. I've been very lucky in my life in that in college, I wanted to go into government. I wanted to work for the State Department. And I realized pretty early that I didn't have the brains to do that, and it wasn't my passion. So I was a decent athlete. I sat on the bench of a college basketball team, hardly ever played, non-scholarship. But I got to see how organizations were put together, successful teams or teams that didn't. And that led to me getting into the first sports management program in the United States, where you could get a degree in sports management. Now, this was a long time ago, in the 70s, not the 1870s, but the 1970s. And that program at Ohio University, I graduated. And believe it or not, Summer, there are now close to 400 programs in sports management in the country. And actually, the University of Memphis has a quality program, coast to coast, north to south. And I am one of the few people, I guess, that has had executive positions in the National Basketball Association, the National Football League, Major League Baseball, and the National Hockey League. And I've also worked in professional soccer, indoor lacrosse, and some other opportunities, which we'll talk about later. Lessons. I learned an early lesson when I worked for the Philadelphia 76ers. And I'm sure for the people listening and watching, many of them are big basketball fans, both of college and the pros. Well, I'm lucky enough that I worked for both the Memphis Grizzlies and the Golden State Warriors and the Philadelphia 76ers. And when I was at the 76ers in 1972, I was administrative assistant, just getting started, to the general manager, which meant I did everything, anytime, anywhere, whatever. I was a glorified gopher, and that was fine. And that team in 1972-73 had the worst record in the history of the NBA to this day. 9-73, 9-73. Yeah, you're shaking your head and going, that's impossible. Look it up. It happened. And a good friend of mine, Rick Welts, he was the president of the Golden State Warriors a few years ago when they went 73-9, the best record in league history. And I called Rick up and I said, hey, Rick, what do you think's harder, 9-73 or 73-9? And he started laughing, and I said, I'm not kidding. I think it's much harder to be 9-73. And to the subject matter that we're talking about, that showed me that when you're in a difficult situation, you have a much greater opportunity to spread your wings, to basically experience opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily have if you're at the best company or the best organization. So I like to say to young people who are looking at careers, run, don't walk, run to chaos and disaster, because that's where you have an opportunity to test yourself. And that happened to me in 1972. And most people who are listening and watching, they have no idea what happened in the world in 1972.
Me either, Andy. I love it. I love it. So before I get into the questions, though, you're also married and children and 6 grandchildren. So tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, well, this year and last year, again, life is an amazing journey. It has ups, it has downs, it has unpredictability. And I think, you know my wife, you met her when she moved to Memphis, and she helped launch the Memphis Farmers Market, which is still going strong, I think. And, she grew up on the East Coast, lived in the West Coast. And then when I got the job and we moved the club to Memphis, she went, Memphis. Yeah, have a nice time in Memphis. But when our identical twin daughters were out of high school, Ellen came, and I was in Memphis for 7.5 great years with you and many other high quality individuals. So we have a son, Corey, who's a senior business executive for the Portland Timbers and Portland Thorns of professional soccer in Portland. Identical twin daughters, Karen and Lindsay. Karen is a senior executive for Eventbrite, the national ticketing and events company based in San Francisco. And Lindsay, who at one time was a writer for ESPN, the magazine, said somebody in this family needs to do something other than sports. And I go, okay, what do you got? She goes, I think I'll get a PhD in literature. I go, oh, there's a real growth opportunity, a PhD in literature. Well, I don't even know if you remember my daughters. They were dynamic little ones.
I do.
Dr. Lindsay Dolich is now an instructor at Stanford University. Go figure that. And awesome. As you are kind enough to mention, we now have 6 grandchildren, 2 for each, right? So we're equal. And as I said to you before, I'm a big basketball fan. I still play. So we have a starting 5 and a new one, 4 months old, coming off the bench. How cool is that?
That is so cool. That is so cool. And I love, yes, hearing about your kids and how they've grown up. And I feel like I was a kid. I was younger than your daughters when I started with the Grizzlies. And here we are 20 years later, exactly 20 years later. And to think about all the life that has happened. I don't take it for granted at all. I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity that I had to start with the team under your leadership. I just can't stress that enough. But let me get into the program because I know you have so much wisdom. So in this program, I have what I call the SOA Success System. And it's my belief that when people can learn how to overcome obstacles, eliminate excuses, and calculate their choices, they can have SOA success. And that is success in spite of anything that they go through, any challenges they face. So Andy, talk a little bit about some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome and just how you did that to be where you are today.
I think life, to a certain extent, comes through definition and understanding as much as you can about the history of who you are, the history of who your family was and is, what journey do you have planned for yourself? And, words are very, very powerful, sticks and stones, but, they can be even more damaging than sticks and stones. And the word obstacle, well, it describes something, but we've all been around people that are always discussing obstacles. And well, this is difficult to do, and I can't do that, and I didn't come from here. Well, you've also heard this. Those are opportunities. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't absolute real obstacles, physical, mental, life circumstances, economics, all of that. That's real. But if your mindset is constantly on, oh boy, this is going to be an uphill climb. I don't know if I can do this, or my boss or somebody else has got this view, then it can be self-defeating, where if you go, all right, I'm working for a basketball team that's 9-73. So I'd say that's kind of an obstacle. And part of my job, Summer, was to sell season tickets. Hi, I'm calling from the 9-73 76ers. Wouldn't you like to spend several $1,000s buying season tickets? Click. And if I took each of those clicks personally, or the people that I worked with, we'd never sell anything.
Right.
And when we introduced the Grizzlies to Memphis, we were talking about a lot of money that people weren't used to because there was no professional sports team other than, I guess, the Redbirds, right? The AAA baseball team.
Yeah.
So they were all over the Tigers in Memphis, a great basketball program. And we were at a completely different level of support. And so the overcoming obstacles in life, they're going to be there. There isn't anybody, no matter how much money they have, no matter how cool they might think they are, everybody has obstacles. But if you view them as tests and opportunities, I haven't seen anything that you can't overcome. And, life in sports and entertainment is sort of cosmetic, right? Summer, I mean, you have all that cool stuff behind you, and I have all this cool stuff. And they go, Summer, you work for the Grizz. Hey, did you know Shane Battier and all this stuff? Well, yeah, that's great, but it's still life. When that's over, you're living your life with family and the challenges that it has. And, who could ever say, oh, let's deal with a pandemic where nobody can be together and can't go to public events, whether they're a basketball game or a church event or a youth group. That throws everybody off. And we've seen how various entities in this country have dealt with COVID-19, which is probably the greatest physical challenge that any of us have faced in our lifetimes.
Absolutely. You talked about obstacles and the opportunities. So funny, when I was at the Grizzlies and I was working on my MBA, and we had to do a project, and I have this big collage, and it's framed, it's on my wall, so I can't hold it up. But that's exactly what it says: turn obstacles into opportunities, adversity into advancement. And so that has been my philosophy for a very, very, very long time. But you said something about Shane Battier. I just had to tell you, this is funny. I still say this. So I was drafted with Shane and Powell. So that was the same year.
And all three of you are all-stars.
Yes, I like it.
And you look at those two individuals and yourself, and Shane comes from Duke and Powell comes from Spain, and how they became quality players. But the real key, and you got to know them a little bit, as did I, they were quality people before they were quality basketball players. And I guess Powell has announced his actual retirement. Shane is doing 18 other things in life. And I remember when Shane was, playing great for us, I said, boy, this guy literally could and should be the mayor of Memphis.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I would have been his campaign manager, and he would have won. Nothing against Dr. Willie Harrington, or Jim Rout, but Shane just had it. He had it all. And that's another example of individuals that didn't just look at themselves as one thing. They didn't just say, well, I'm an educator or I'm a basketball player. They said, I'm a human being. How can I sort of help out in my community?
Yeah, they were awesome. They were definitely awesome to work with. So the next part of the SOA success system is about excuses, eliminating excuses. As you mentioned, we all will have obstacles, but we all also can make excuses for not overcoming those obstacles. Talk about some excuses that you've had to overcome or eliminate from your life, or maybe some excuses that you made.
Oh, you know me, I never invented an excuse in my life. Excuses are, to me, the equal of people today. Summer, sorry, I can't talk to you today. I'm very busy. It's like, you're the only person in the world that's very busy. What does busy mean? What does busy actually mean? It's like, Summer, I don't want to talk to you, or I have nothing to give you, or I don't view this as something that I want to be involved in. Then tell the truth.
Then say that, right?
Don't say you're busy. Or another of my favorite is called FTR, F Frank TR. And you wouldn't know it. I see you kind of going, do I know?
Right.
No. So FTR is failure to reply. All you have to do is say, Andy, sorry, not interested in what you're pitching. Summer, not my area of expertise. Just tell me. Don't go silent. Don't offer an excuse. Just as best you can, tell the truth in a diplomatic fashion,
right?
Or be direct. You're not throwing 4-letter words at people. Just say, yes, we can do this. No, we can't. Excuses are part of everybody's sort of language these days. But what's frustrating to me is excuses that are sort of made up. If there's a conflict, you and I just this morning said, look, I have a time crunch. Can you adjust your schedule? And I got back to you pretty quickly and said, yes, I can. And you gave me 2 options. Now, we've known each other for many, many years, and that's okay. But anybody should be able to do that, instead of, if you sent it to me and I never responded, you'd have a big question mark. So, excuses are just that. They have an X in them, right? The word. That means you can't do it. I view it the opposite way. Okay, just get me something that makes sense and seems close to the truth or the absolute truth, and we'll either figure out a way to make it work or we won't. And if we don't, it's not the end of the world.
I like that. I like it. It's a simple communication thing. And so since I have been in sales, so I started in Grizzlies in sales, and it was, you were talking about calling. I'm like, yeah, I was one of those people making those phone calls. But I'm back to sales now because I'm as an entrepreneur, I'm everything in my business. And it's the same thing. There's so many people who simply don't respond. And so
I'm glad you brought that up, because not every business, but if you're a heart surgeon, you're not necessarily selling, although ultimately you've got to get a position in a hospital and you're selling your expertise. But so much, and you saw it from the ground up, and I did at the 76ers, you're selling a product, you're selling NBA basketball, but what you're really selling, and what I'm very proud of, is how we became a community asset to so many people in Memphis and North Mississippi, right? As we know. And it wasn't just the basketball, it was a town square that people could come celebrate, whether it was at the Pyramid for a few years and then FedEx Forum. So the sales aspect, when you ask a lot of young people, do you like sales? You go, ooh, sales, no, I don't want to sell anything. Well, if you really analyze life is about the sales process, whether you believe it or not. And I always view myself like, Andy, well, what did you really do? And you're president of this and you have that cool title. I go, I'm a sales guy for that team, trying to have people involved in many different ways, selling to the staff, having the staff understand where it's going, selling to the owner of the team, the late Mike Heisley. As you know, Mike always had a big smile on his face and was always happy. Not always. So
you probably saw that more than me.
Yeah. So I think the sales process that you brought up is very important for people to understand that you and I, Summer, should come up with another word, a cooler word than sales, because the word sales is people go, oh, first thing they hear. You don't find many people, oh, sales, yeah. But I think that's really important, that we're all salespeople.
And I think you're exactly right. So even when you mentioned the example with the heart surgeon, this is what immediately came to my mind was, yes, you are. Everybody is a salesperson. You're selling yourself to get to what you want, a position that you want, or a job that you want, or a situation, or even a relationship that you want. We're always in a position of selling. Okay.
I tell you, one other story pops to mind as you were thinking. When I was at the Oakland A's, and that's the longest period that I spent with one team. And most people usually they don't work in 4 sports. And I'm not egotistical about this. It's just the way that it went. But I went to a friend of mine when I was at the A's, and we were doing very well, and we were going to World Series, a lot of national publicity. We were doing really well in attendance. And I said, I think I'm ready to move up. So I was a vice president. And I said, what does a person do to become president of a team or chief operating officer? And he worked for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and they were very successful, and we were pretty good buddies. And he said, well, Andy, you can't be president until you're president. And I thought about it for a minute, and I went, okay, I haven't the slightest idea what that means. And he looked at me and he said, well, you can't be president until you're president. And I go, sorry, not getting it. He goes, you have some talents, right? You've done pretty well. You've gotten some publicity about it. The organization is being thought of as a quality organization, right? And I said, right. He goes, so if you're sitting in an interview, if you're interviewing me, Summer, or vice versa, I might think, or you might think, you know what, I'm qualified for this position. But it doesn't matter until the person on the other side of the desk or the video screen these days goes, you know what, Summer, you are absolutely the right person for this job. Or Andy, you're ready to do this. And then it sort of hit me that his advice was simple, sounded stupid, but was very, very insightful. Until the other person believes that you have those abilities, it doesn't matter. People shove how many people have shoved their resumes across their desk at you? Look at me, Summer, I can do this, I can do that.
Yeah.
Calm down. Tell me about yourself. Do you understand my organization? Do you understand what I'm trying to do? Do you understand the constituency that I'm trying to reach? And if you don't do that, you usually don't get what you want. So, that is one when it comes to ultimate excuses where people go, well, I'm super qualified. Well, so are 100,000 other people.
Exactly. You know, when you say that, it makes me, I think back to my time at the Grizzlies and how appreciative I was to be there because of what you just said. There were so many people who were qualified, more qualified than I was. And I even have to give a shout out to Marla Tanner.
I was with Marla a week ago in Vancouver, Summer.
Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome.
And Stephanie Willix too.
That is awesome. Well, I was there. I spent 2 weeks with her. Now it's been 2 years ago, but yeah, so I've stayed connected to her. And when you just talked about until the person across from you sees that you're in that position or qualified for that position. And I was so grateful for Marla because she was that person for me and she could see that in me.
And she is as effervescent and as wonderful today as she was then. And the other point, Summer, is she could see in you, as many could see in others, that person has an open mind, enthusiasm, and work ethic to get it done. And even if, okay, so I went to Harvard or Stanford, or yeah, that's all fine. What are you bringing to the table?
Absolutely. It just gets me excited. That period of time in my life was transformational. It really, really was. And the advice that you just gave is advice that I give students and young professionals too, all the time. It's like the degree is important, but more important is your attitude. And
I would throw this one in. When Ellen came to Memphis, she looked around and said, this is a place that grows stuff and has where's the farmer's market? And there was there ain't no farmer's market. So here's this lady from California, right? Lady, you ain't from around here. And she basically, got to individuals like the late Lynn Turley, who recently passed, and others. And they said, hey, let's go talk to people about creating a downtown farmer's market. If she would have listened, or they would have listened to all the excuses, that never would have happened. And now every weekend, 10 years later, there's still a part in the community that people get together and I think love it because she
saw an opportunity and made a difference. And yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I like for people to take that message too. There are little things that you can do to just start something new. If you can get rid of the excuses, just make stuff happen. Make it happen. So, okay, the final element of the SOA success system is calculating choices. And I even just think about the choices that come to my mind for you immediately, just moving to the different teams and to the different sports. What are some of the choices that you've had to make throughout your life to get to where you are?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, as I look at any organization, whether it's a family, whether it's a sports team, whether it's a social organization, you have to have 3 key areas: teamwork, leadership, and trust. Teamwork, leadership, and trust. Seems simple, but if we analyze in our life in a day, how many organizations that we're involved in or we look at really have those 3, and don't just have them for a day or a week or a month, but have them year after year, those sort of define, the success that you have. I also look at businesses, and I've been in one realm of sports/entertainment. People think it's so glamorous and so cool, and you get so much money and you get autographed stuff that you could put in your background, and like, wow, this person and that person. You have timeout. You're working your butt off. Not that you're complaining, but you're working a lot of time. You're not being paid as much as some of your friends who might have way more boring jobs, who might have stock options that you'll never get. But you're more than the place that you work. So it's your family, your team. It's probably unbelievable to you, Summer, and unbelievable to me, but next June, Ellen and I will celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
So, Summer, most people aren't 50 years old, let alone married for 50 years. And as I like to say, we are so proud. We have 3 adult children, none of whom serve long prison sentences. And what's most important as you're moving through these chapters in the career of your life, to understand that you have a partner. However you define partnership in today's world, doesn't matter to me. Whatever definition of a family is, whatever that should be, they are critically important in helping you make decisions. Now, I have, since we're getting to the end here, I have a new book called Loss of Logo. What's your next move? And this, what we did is we went to 50 people in the world of sports and entertainment and asked them similar questions to what you asked, Summer. And this is available on Amazon.com, and it's really inexpensive. So I think you should run.
And it's a great book too. I just have to say that, Andy, I read it and I loved it, but go ahead.
Yeah. So we move around, we define ourselves in different ways. But if you try to make those decisions that you talked about just by yourself, without your parents, without your family, without your friends, without your mentors, you can make a mistake. And that mistake can be difficult. Where if you bring all of these individuals on your team, however you define it, in whatever business, no matter what you're doing, no matter how old or young you are, you can usually reach the right decision, especially if people are around you that go back to the very original point that we started. They're going to tell you the truth, and you're going to accept it as the truth instead of, sorry, Summer, I'll get back to you in 3 months. I'm very busy.
I love it. I love it. Well, Andy, you talked about teamwork, leadership, and trust, and that being crucial to the success of an organization. And I just have to give you your flowers, because you built that.
Thank you. I love roses or daisies or whatever.
Those were imaginary roses. Then those were roses. You definitely did that with us, because I think about my time there, and again, it being my first job, and I've had several since then, and been in many other organizations, and nothing has ever compared to it.
I thank you for saying that. The good news is there are thousands of organizations and individuals, and you're one now because you've become a leader in what you're doing. And you mentioned, a number of people at the Grizzlies, and I don't think we're just saying this, they've become leaders.
Absolutely.
And it's sort of like throwing a pebble in a pond, Summer. It has ripples. And if it's a bad organization, there aren't very many ripples. And if it's a quality organization, those ripples go on for a while.
And then we see those ripples. We definitely see those ripples. And I just want to say, though, it felt like a family. We really felt like a family. We still have our connections, a lot of our connections, but it was because of the leadership and the teamwork and the trust that we had in you and in each other and in the organization. So they're your roses.
Well, I accept the roses. I'm happy to come back anytime to talk with you and the people that you're helping
Got a couple more questions before we wrap though. Just a couple
Okay,
more.
all right.
Let me say this. And Lynn, I have to say this too, because this is pretty funny. Rasheed Wallace is one of our assistant coaches for the University of Memphis now. And I met him at an event. And the first day I was like, oh yeah, I was like, I used to see you play all the time. It's like when I used to play for the Grizzlies. And he looked at me crazy. And I was like, why is he looking at me like, he's like, you used to play for the Grizzlies? I was like, oh, I didn't mean that. I used to work for the Grizzlies.
Right.
Well, Andy, okay, so we'll wrap this up. So what I have is a SOA success system. When you can overcome obstacles, eliminate excuses, and calculate choices, you have SOA success. You can achieve that success in spite of any challenges you face. But Andy, how do you personally define success?
Success is what you believe in your heart and those around you define you as in the most truthful manner. So in your heart and in your soul, you know truth from fiction, no matter what. And some people define themselves maybe incorrectly, right? We've seen those individuals. But if you were to ask a number of different people, what do you think about Summer? What do you think about Andy? And you know those people are truthful. All of it is not going to be glowing and wonderful, but it's all part of you. And as long as you can accept that and understand and become better, you know, people, I would say this, Summer, people say, well, Andy, how are you enjoying retirement? And I go, I'm not retired. I'm not going to be retired, hopefully for a long time. There's too many other opportunities because every day you're meeting a new person. Every day you're looking at new opportunities, maybe obstacles, maybe people who make excuses. But since I left my last sort of real job as chief operating officer of the San Francisco 49ers, and most people go, wow, why don't you just retire after that? I've done stuff for 10 or 11 years, going on longer, and helping new leagues and new concepts because it's energetic. It's something that, like getting up every day and going, do I have to go to the office? No, it's like, boom, bang. Now, I don't have to get super dressed up and I don't work for a shield. As I like to tell people, I only work for one moron, and they go, who's that? And I go, like, you're looking at him. So I just think there's so much to do. And also I'm involved in a number of boards and organizations that give back. And if you're just taking, you're a perfect example. If you're just taking and not giving back, then your heart is not going to be full.
Right. I love that. I have one last question, but before I do, I want to talk about the book just a little bit more, because one thing that I could really appreciate about the book, when I started working for the Memphis Grizzlies, I didn't have a goal to work in sports. You know, there are a lot of people who have a passion, they want to work in sports. And even after I left the Memphis Grizzlies, it was only because of I wanted to make more money. And I had earned my MBA, but I love your book because as I was reading it, it made me think about how your identity can get tied into sports. My whole identity. I'm important because I work in sports.
My business card.
My title.
If anybody has a business card anymore, right?
Yeah. And I love that. And I love that even though I'm not in sports anymore, I am a brand. And we all work for a brand. If you have a job at all, whether it's your own brand or someone else's brand, and getting wrapped up into it. So I just want to encourage people to read your book,
well,
whether you want to work in sports or not.
I appreciate it. And, you know, one last thing that I'd say, so I'm not too late for this next appointment, is you have the competitive gene. It was in you. And that doesn't mean you played for the Memphis Grizzlies, no matter what Sheed said. But you had much better temperament than he had at that time. But you have the competitive gene, and that's a real key to all the listeners. You don't have to be a superstar athlete. You could be in the band, you could be in the debate club, you could be an artist. As long as you understand how to pick yourself up after you're knocked down, with a competitive gene, you can accomplish anything.
I love it. My last question was going to be about advice, and you just gave it to us. So
I did, but let's make this chapter one of other chapters, Summer, okay?
I love it. Thank you so much, Andy. Have a good one.
Okay, you say hi to everybody back there in
I
Memphis.
sure will. Miss
Okay.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.